Meet Louise Lawrence Rose, a helping professional who has made her impact on the educational landscape of Jamaica in the roles of teacher, guidance counselor, acting vice principal, master trainer, health and family life educator, and community relations education officer. Mrs. Lawrence Rose is currently a doctoral student whose research into the dangers of toxic lead is inspired by her son JR. Because of him, she hopes to publish a research that can be useful in the education of parents, teachers, and other caregivers of early childhood learners and avert future incidences of lead exposure in our most vulnerable population. Mrs. Lawrence Rose is a published author with Macmillan Publishers and has contributed to the need of sound health and family life education material throughout the Caribbean at the primary level. She is a First Lady who supports her husband Robert in Pastoral Ministry in the Church of the United Brethren in Christ, particularly in the areas of children, women, and youth ministries. She serves as a volunteer scout with the Scouts Association of Jamaica, where she mentors youth and supports camping and hiking trips to several places of interest, both locally and abroad. Mr. Rose is also a police chaplain with the Jamaica Constabulary Force Chaplaincy Services branch. Additionally, Mrs. Lawrence Rose is a team member of the Jamaica Parent School, a non-profit organization that gives psychosocial, educational, and spiritual support to parents and communities in Jamaica. She has served the Jamaica Association of Education Officers as an active member of the Public Relations Committee and the Jamaica Association of Guidance Counsellor in Education as Regional and General Secretary at transformational times in the association's history. A highly motivated and dedicated professional, Mrs. Lawrence Rose has the proven ability to transform the delivery of educational, family life, and health services through comprehensive planning, professionalism, team effort, best practices, and networking. She has honed her communication, problem solving, collaborative human relations, interpersonal, organizational, oral, and written communication skills. Additionally, she excels at training, workshop management, strategic planning, organizing, and researching. She is a prudent manager of financial and other resources and a creative user of technology in improving work outcomes. Mrs. Lawrence Rose, welcome to Defying the Odds.
Mrs. Stewart-Singh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
What a holy thing. Oh Lord, I met you, Louise, and I have to try to stop calling you Lois.
Yes, my dear.
I don't know where we get Lois from, but that's what I've been saying. But I met you when I was working on a parenting project.
I remember.
You were just very quiet and unassuming. That's all. I hardly hear you spoke or said anything. And then Noah linked you up on Facebook when I saw you were doing these stories on who have achieved, and I love the stories. So it was as a result of that I linked up with you on Facebook because I wanted to read the stories and wanted to learn some more about this lady who was writing all of these stories.
Wonderful.
I myself am a story lover.
Yes.
Today we are going to talk about your journey and what a journey it has been.
Yes, my dear.
You grew up in Macatree and Browns Hall in St. Catherine. And in
Yes,
particular in your childhood years, you would have moved around a lot because you're very humble beginning, very poor beginning. Let's talk about.
yes. Well, yes. As I explained, my childhood was very, very rocky, and it was a better word would be tumultuous. Um, I lived with both my parents and my siblings. I am the second of 5 children from my parents, and we lived together in a community in St. Catherine, rural St. Catherine, called Macatree. Now, as I grew up, I realized that my surroundings was very aggressive. It was violent, so to speak. My parents would quarrel a lot, and they would fight sometimes. I remember this big fight that
Mm-hmm.
caused them to separate one night. And as children, we were very fearful, you know. And when my mother left, it was really very heartbreaking for us and so forth. And we felt lost. We didn't know what was going to happen next and so forth. And so what happened is that different family members came and took us to different location. And so I lived for a while with my great grandmother. Longevity runs in my family. And then from there, I remember my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, coming for me one evening, and he brought me to a neighboring community called Brownsall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was so excited because I thought I was going to live with my grandfather. Because, knowing him, he used to come by and visit us like on Christmas time and so forth. So we knew he was grandfather and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once he had brought us to Brownsall before and brought us to his mother. And, we really loved her and loved the home and so forth. And so when he came for me, I thought that, oh, okay, I'm going back to that lovely place. And it was feeling so exciting. Anyway, to my surprise, he brought me to live with his neighbor. I didn't know that I had any relations to that lady. Because,
Yeah.
in those days, they never explained anything to us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He just brought me there, and he and the lady had this conversation. And after they had the conversation, she started to address me, and she said, "What is your name?" And I said, "My name is Louise." She said, "What a big name for a little girl. Do you have any other names?" And I said, "Well, they call me Mitzi." That was a pet
Okay.
name.
Mm-hmm.
No, 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 no. There is a character up here by the name of Mitzi, and I don't want to associate you with that person. And she said,
Okay.
"Any other names?" Because she was a
Wow.
very primitive. And I said, "Okay." I reached for my middle name,
Mm-hmm.
which is Cadian. And I told her Cadian, and she said, "Well, yes, that's a more, feasible name, I guess." And
Okay.
so I go to Brownsall now. Everybody in Brownsall will call me Cadian.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have another pet name which my brother gave me when I was a baby, and it's Pretty. So people will call me by Cadian, Louise, Pretty, and I have these names. Anyhow, I lived with that lady for a while, and I did not know our relation. Actually, it was just last year I recognized through the death of a cousin
Mm-hmm.
that she was actually my uncle's mother-in-law. So my
Oh.
grandfather's brother was married to her daughter.
Oh.
So yes, so we were like closely related in-laws. So she was, what would I say now? An old lady that was a little bit on the miserable kind of removed end. She wasn't very warm, put
Okay.
it that way. She
Yes.
needed a little girl to help her run errands and so forth around the house. She had a husband and he was older. He could hardly move about. And, you know, they needed somebody just to be an extra pair of feet, I guess. And
Okay.
so that's how I felt there. I had a little cot that I slept on, and, you know, things like outside bathroom, stuff like that and so forth. Even though there were inside amenities, I was not
Yes.
allowed to use them, you know. So
Mm.
I had to get up early and get my shower going before the dust came down and stuff like that, or use the outside toilet and so forth before night, because, you know, there were strict rules, even the sitting room. Because I'm thinking that if I had ever gone into the living room, then I would have seen pictures of these other family members that, you know, of
Yes.
my own relatives,
Okay.
because yeah, she was married into my
Your
family. So
family. Yes.
wow, I never ever even went into the living room where she had all these lovely pictures and, you know, the carpet and the sofa and stuff like that. There were very strict rules. Anyway, it didn't work out. The relationship didn't work out. So I stayed there briefly. And when her grandchildren came, and we had a argument one weekend, and her older grandchild kicked at me, and I was so upset and I started to cry. So I turned my mouth over to where I know my grandfather could hear me, and I cried. And then he started, you know, he came over and he said, "What's
Yes.
wrong?" And I said, "So and so kick at me." And he said, "She's not a dog. Why you kick at her?" And she said, "I
Wow.
never kicked her. I kicked at her." He said, "But she's not a dog, so why you do that?" Okay, pack your stuff. And I was now so excited, like, oh, yes, I'm going to live with my grandfather. But again, my grandfather did not have the space to keep me. He lived in a
Yes.
small apartment, and he was recently married too. And so I came in like a third toe, right? And
Yes.
so he got another little bed for me, and he put it on the floor, right in between their bed and the table, and that's where I would sleep. Anyway, that never worked out. uh, I realized something after I'm older and started processing these things, that the background and some of the antecedents to where I was alcoholism, right?
Yes.
So alcoholism was what affected those interpersonal conflicts. So I was a child of an alcoholic home, and I
Okay.
never realized that because my father drank and he smoked marijuana.
Okay.
And when I went to live with my grandfather, he was an alcoholic as well.
Okay.
And he would have these episodes when he would come in drunk, and then, you know, he would spill liquid, and he would, you know, but
Yes.
he was a very loving person. So even when he was drunk, he would just tell me, "I love you."
Wow.
Right? And he would tell
Yes.
me who he thinks doesn't love me, who he thinks doesn't want me around, and so forth. But he would
Yes.
always remember that he loved me and
That's
so forth.
great.
Anyway, it didn't work out.
Yes.
He asked his mother to keep me, and I went to that lovely home that I described to you
Yes.
earlier, and I was staying there. But also, that was not very convenient either, because it was a situation where all the rooms were already taken, and I was sleeping between two ladies, because she kept two young ladies for a church member who was abroad. So they were living with her as well. And so in between those young girls, I slept and so forth.
Okay.
Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was not so good. So, for example, when they used to give me jokes at night and so forth, I couldn't contain my laughter. And so I could laugh out loudly, and she would shout at me and she'd say, "Kadian, go to your bed." And you know, I could not contain it, because I was a little young girl and they tickled me and so forth. And they could contain themselves, but I couldn't. And I bust out a big laugh. I know, because an old lady, she want to
Yes.
sleep. She have her little pain in her joints and whatever. And this little girl that's making pain eyes in the house.
Eyes of
So
her
she
head. Yes.
as the morning come, go round to your grandfather. So it was that kind of relationship where we are together, and I'm in there are good graces, but as I make a mistake, you go around to your grandfather kind of thing,
Okay. Okay.
Just like that. And I moved about a bit. But the beauty about all of that is that I felt safe, I felt
Yes.
protected. There was an unfortunate incident with a family member where I felt like I was being abused, where I was held onto, and asked to, kissing, give me a kiss. And I was so scared, and I ran away, and I ran to my grandmother, and I told her, but he tried to reach to her before me and tell her that, this little girl is so rude. Don't send her back down to my house and so forth. And he was like shouting over me and all of that. And so as I
Trying
grew
to
up and
cover himself.
cover himself, as I
Yes.
grew up and I became a guidance counselor, these are the things that I taught to children, and I taught them how to assert themselves. And even my story, I used it. I put myself in the story and said, okay, this is what happened to Estella, or give myself a name. How would you deal with it? Who would you tell? What would you do? And so forth. So I break it down for them and
Yes.
so forth. But for the most part, I was fed. I felt, secure. I felt comfortable. And the beauty about living in Brownsall was that I was surrounded by a lot of books and people of learning. So all my aunts and cousins and so forth, they were either high school graduates or they had gone on to college and so forth. So there were books, there were other resources, and also my grandmother and my grand aunt, they played Scrabble for a pastime. And so, mind
That
games.
helped
And
to
so
build your vocabulary.
to build my vocabulary and help me to think. Cousin, I called her aunt because, in those days, all right, so she would call her Aunt Hazel, and she was crippled. But Aunt Hazel was very much interested in me, and my grandfather sent me around to her house to just read to her in the evenings. And
Yes.
so I was standing there with my books, and for me, Latoya, when you get those stack of books from the Ministry of Education, was the greatest day in my life. It's
Wow.
like when the book truck came, and then they would take out the books for the different grades, and then the teacher would put all the sets of books on her desk and ask us to come up and take one from each pile. Oh my goodness, heaven come down and glory fill my soul. The smell, oh God, I get lost in those books. I guess because of, all that was happening around me, I
Yes.
took reading for an escape. And
Yes.
so I loved reading. And so my grandfather insisted that I would read to Aunt Hazel, and she would help me with my pronunciation and enunciation and my comprehension and my literacy skills and so forth. Another person I'd like to mention is the principal of my then primary school, and Brownsall Primary, by the way. And that principal, B.E. Harris, I never had the books because we never had it like that, And as I told you, my grandfather was an alcoholic, and so he would have perhaps squandered even his
His
own
money on alcohol.
on alcohol. So she agreed with my grandfather for me to come to her house and study with her grandchildren who had the resources. And so in the evenings, aside from reading to Aunt Hazel, I would go to Miss Harris's house and sit with her grandchildren, Judine and Colleen, and we would read and study and so forth. And I'm telling you, by the grace of God, I passed my common entrance. I got my first choice, which
Yes.
was Ose Marty High School. At that time, it was high. I think it
Yes.
is technical high now. And so,
After that, you were able to go and live with your mother.
yes, because that was my dream. It's like there was a pause in my life, and I thought that I can't wait to reunite with my mother, And
Yeah,
so
but your mother now was living in Denham Town, close to
yes,
Tivoli Gardens.
My dear, so when I thought I was going to live in heaven now, because I just know that my mother live in town, right? So I am looking forward to go and live in town. I
Okay.
remember when I go on the country bus, pack
Yes.
up all of my accoutrements them,
Yes.
and
Going
reach
to
Kingston,
town.
going to town. And when a family member met me on the bus and brought me to see where she lived, she was in Denham Town.
Yes.
No, it did not feel anyway strange to me. It was just town, and I didn't know the carryings on of that kind of community,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. But as I grew and as I went to high school and had different experiences, I realized that that community was a very hard knock community. It was a very
Yes.
tough community,
Silence.
a violent community, and some hard lessons for you to learn. And even though we were Christians, my mother had just become a new convert. She had just gotten baptized, and we all started going to church, and church was really like a haven for us and
Mm-hmm.
another place of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it was a Seventh-day Adventist church in Denham Town called Regent
Mm-hmm.
Street, and I'm telling you, that is a university.
Wow.
And so we got a lot of teaching, and we got a lot of mentorship and counseling and encouragement and so forth. But it did not prevent the things around us from
Seeping in.
coming in and from seeping in. And we were exposed to even gun violence,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
So your cousin now had some interactions with a
my
gunman.
dear, my cousin, I had a cousin coming from the country, from Clarendon, and she was living with us. And she was going to Tivoli Gardens High School.
Yes.
So she now got herself entangled in a relationship with a gunman. So now
Mm-hmm.
this brought a lot of exposure to
Mm-hmm.
gun and that lifestyle to
Mm-hmm.
us. So I remember one day I was there, cooking, because I always loved the kitchen. I did home economics in high school, and I
Yes.
would go on to college to do home economics. And I was we didn't have any gas, I think, and I was cooking on a coal stove at the in the backyard, and I
Mm-hmm.
just heard the zinc kind of
Yes.
shifting, and when I looked, there was the man, right?
Yes.
And he said, can I get something for your dinner? No, I did not. I said, okay, sure, sure, sure. I didn't think it was, anything odd. So
Yes.
I gave him the dinner. I didn't know that a neighbor saw, right?
Yes.
And then she would see the man come there, come and leave and come and leave. But he was actually
Yes.
coming to my cousin. When
Mm-hmm.
he came there, I made it my point of duty to leave the house. And I had friends, down the road. I would go and spend time with my friends and so forth. And then I would leave. The reason I would know when he left is because he always traveled with a lot of guides.
Okay.
So he's walking, and you'd see him walk by himself, and like he's looking for police, looking for soldier, and then he would come into the open, and then when you look, you see another set of guys, the 6 or 7 guys behind him,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I was at my friend and I would look and see the group of them leaving, then I would know it would be six. My neighbor told my mother that I am along with a gunman now, because she saw when I gave him the food, right?
Oh, yes.
So my mother had this conference now, and she called all of us, me and my sisters and my cousin. She said, what is happening in this house? Because I heard that something is happening and one of you is along with a gunman. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, and then she's not saying it so nicely, like I'm putting it. I'm just
Yes.
paraphrasing, because she was
Yes.
living, ready to tear us up now.
Yes.
Anyway, I said, it's not me. I'm playing my cards out early. It's not me,
Yes.
because I was the chief one in line for fire. So my cousin, told my mother about it and so forth. And my mother was like, why? How? Why you made that choice and all of that and so forth. So anyway, it was already done and so forth. Conflicts between the
Yes.
gunman and her and the gunman's woman, right? And so we
Okay.
got
So
involved
the
in that.
gunman
So
had another woman.
he had another woman, and he had children with that woman. And
Oh.
now the woman realized that he loved my cousin, and and was paying a lot of attention to her and coming to us and so on. And so she would not have it. So she would come there and she would start fights. She would throw bottles and stuff in the house and so forth. So these things usually happen when my mother is not there, because my mother was always trying to make twins meet for us.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
she'd be out, she'd be at the factory working, she'd be trying, you know, just to put two ends meet together. So we were often at home by ourselves, right?
Okay.
And I'm telling you, one day there was just this violent episode where it was not a day, actually, it was a night, a bedroom watching the television together, and we just heard the louver windows just start to break and brace, and somebody was just opening the windows like that, and there was a young lady and she was pushing her head in and she was throwing bottles in and she was throwing stuff in, and
Yes.
she was telling my cousin some colorful language and so forth. And so we ran out through the back, my sister and I, and she shouted at me and she said, go and call so and so. So because we know where they always hang out now, we went there and we saw the man and his friends, and I went up to him and I said, listen, the lady, your friend, is mashing up my mother's house. I needed to come and get her and so forth.
Yes.
And the man said to me, you know what, I'm going to come, but you have to carry something for me because police and soldiers up on the road and all of that and so forth. And Latoya, my everlasting shame, I carried that gun. I carried the gun, you know, and I was so scared.
Yes.
And I when I got there, I don't know where he came from, because he's a person like this. I used to wonder if he was somebody else, like other than human, because he would just appear and disappear like that. So, you know, they kind of master the art of invasion. So I didn't know where he came from, and he said, give me the gun. And I gave it to him, and I was like bending down, listening to hear, you know, loud shots and so forth, and I didn't hear anything. And then my brother came for me and said, come, let's go inside. And I asked them what happened, and they said that the lady saw him coming and she ran and all of that and so forth. And when I went back up to the house, he was there with his friends, and they were trying to mend back the windows, they were trying to put back things together. But that whole situation, I couldn't sleep at nights. If I heard the zinc at the back move any shift anyway, it's just like my whole inside tearing out, the way I was just fearful. Anyway, God would have it, I'm saying God would have it, that my great-great-grandmother that I mentioned earlier would die.
Yes.
And so that caused all of us now, excluding my cousin, to go to the country. And so while we were in the country, Latoya, we heard about how many of them from that group were killed by either each other, police or soldier or whatever. So they were just, or who ran away and all of that. So that is something I would say God allowed us to escape from.
To escape.
Understand?
Yes.
Anyhow, in the middle of all of that, I would still having to be studying for my external exams and so forth. And God, you know, helped me, and I still passed my exams. I got good grades. I got 1s and 2s, and I was able to matriculate into college.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yes, yes. You have always known how to weather the storms, Louise, and indeed defy the odds. So you would have matriculated to go to the Michael, but just you went on to the Michael, you would have worked as a pre-trained teacher. So talk about your pre-trained teacher years and then how you transitioned into the Michael, and tell us what it was like going to the Michael, because that was no easy road at all. It was hard all the way through it. It has been difficult. Let's talk about
right. So after I finished high school, my mother was saying, come on now, apply for college, but I didn't feel like I was ready. So I was trying to explore some other options, and September was coming along. I did not do anything. And so she said, okay, she's going to ask her principal. And she was working at a prep school at the time. And she said yes. And so I came in kindergarten as a pre-trained teacher. And I found out that I loved it. And actually, I'm from a family of teachers. So
Okay.
my mother is a principal currently. My grand aunt was a teacher, and I have other teachers in the family, other educators. And so it came naturally to me.
Yes.
So I was there learning, the different skills of teaching and so
So
forth.
your mother would have improved herself over the years and would have
Yes,
advanced to becoming a teacher and a principal
yes.
today.
Yes, yes. So first of all, she was a pre-trained teacher like myself,
Yes.
and she learned this great principal. I just have to mention her. She's dead now, though. She's Daphne Chin, and
Mm-hmm.
she had one of the top prep schools in um, Portmore. Oh, I should have mentioned that when all of this violence was going on, after my great grandmother passed away, my mother decided that she's going to move on from this community. She didn't have the
Okay.
money or anything. So, but she, by faith, she moved us out of Denham Town. She didn't even tell us where we were going. We just saw the truck came the very day, and she started to pack and move us out. And so we lived in Portmore. And so that time created other opportunities for
Okay.
us, like this job for her. And then I got to work at the same school. And
Okay.
just to be among like-minded educators and
Yes.
other persons who are applying for college. And so I applied for the MICO and I got through. I also applied for Shortwood Teachers College and I got through. But, MICO was more renowned, and other
Yes.
persons said, MICO is the one. And so I went to MICO. And
Mm-hmm.
after my acceptance, the next thing was the finances. It was very,
Mm-hmm.
very difficult. And my mother, as a single parent, uh, she did not have the resources. And so I
Mm-hmm.
applied for student loan. I was successful. I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to my father, and my father was so excited, and he was like, "What, my daughter going to college?" And he would laugh and said he was going to help me. Latoya, the man gave me $1,000. $1,000. That time I remember that my first year school fee was $20,000. It seemed like nothing now, but that time it was like
Yeah, that's a lot. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he gave me $1,000. My mother said, "Give it back." She was so mad. She was so mad. But I did not have the courage.
Yes.
I didn't have the courage because I always saw my father as just this fearful person in the back of my head because of those past experiences.
Yeah. Yes.
But I didn't have the courage to, speak up to him. But once I got the courage to speak up to my father, respectfully, no doubt, and tell him, my side of the story and how I saw things and what I would appreciate if he stopped doing, I realized that I had the courage to speak to anybody in life, and so, but
You
at that time I
slay
didn't have
one
the
giant, and
courage. Yes,
then you feel like you have the courage to slay others.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And so at that time, I didn't have the courage to give him back the $1,000, So I use it about little roll on and whatever I use it
Yes.
for and
Yes,
so forth.
man.
Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
I went on to college and I didn't allow, the fees and the stress and whatever to affect my learning. I continued and I did well. I remember once I didn't have the books, I didn't have the resources for an assignment, and I was walking and asking persons, can you help me? And nobody had the information. And I remember I was a spring, I was just so distressed.
Yes.
And I don't know who to this day, when I came back to my dorm room, I saw all the information from A to Z on my bed. I
Wow.
don't know who put it there, but I know
Wow.
it's just God provided for me.
Yes.
I
Yes.
did the assignment and I submitted it and I got an A. So I went through college. When I graduated, I got credit diploma. I
Mm-hmm.
got excellence in the use of technology in education, and I got excellence in teaching practice and all
Mm-hmm.
of these things. So I really,
And you
really
had
thank the Lord.
friends who helped you along the way because you were telling me about a friend who helped you with the sewing.
Look here. So in addition to the cooking,
Yes.
I had to be balanced, because in home economics, they don't want you to just come in and just doing your specialty. You have to do all areas. So you have to do the
Okay.
sewing, You have to do the home management, you have to do the food and nutrition, right? You have to do the physiology and the chemistry and everything. So it's a well-rounded program. So I excel in all areas except the sewing, right? And
Yes.
so I had an exam, and in the exam, you know, I knew I was gonna fail. I was just sitting there because I had to put on collar, I have to put on sleeve and all of these things, and I really was struggling. And I had a friend, and her name is Karine, and I told her already, and Karine said, Louise, and she gave me her blouse, and she said, hem it up and give me yours. And she sewed mine. I said, no, hem up mine. And that's how I passed the exam, because I couldn't put them on, you know. But I could read, I could do the theory aspect of the course and so forth, and I passed that. And so it was a friend who helped me to pass that one, right? And so I always put someone in my path to help push me on to the next level. And so
after graduation now.
Yes. After graduation, I really didn't want to go back home, you know, because after living 3 years on the dorm, learning your independence and so forth, I really wanted to continue in that vein and get a place for myself and start working. So I didn't know how to go about it, you know, and so I was praying about it, because in everything I used to pray. I used to wake up early in the morning. There was this stairs that led up to the roof, and I used to go up there before the sunrise and just pray and have my devotion. Anyway,
and by this time your mother would have remarried or would have gotten married, because she was married in the first relationship, was she?
She did not marry my father, but she got remarried, and I didn't want to go back into that situation because her husband also had children, and so it was a big blended family. So I didn't feel like I fit into that scenario. So anyway, the Lord provided again for me a friend, right? This friend, her mother asked me one day, I called the phone and she said, would you like to come and live with so and so here, because I'm about to go abroad, you know, and do some other business, and so I don't want to leave her with family, but you two are two responsible young ladies, and I think we could stay here together, you know, as young professionals. And I was like, that's the answer to my prayer, but I didn't say it to her. I just said, I'm going to pray about it, but I already know what the answer was. And so I was provided that path transition from college into independent living. And you know, through that course of that summer, I was applying for jobs, and I did not get any job. So I tried, by suggestion of my friend, she said, why don't you try CV Gardens Primary? And I tried the school, I applied there, and I got the job the same day. You know, the principal was very impressed with my interview, and she said, Miss, I have a job for you, and she gave me a grade 4 class. Now, I knew what I could do, you know, in terms of transforming a class, or, you know, just, you know, applying the skills that I'd learned in college. And so I made the best use of the opportunity, and she was very impressed. And even by the end of the year, I was able to get my permanence, you know. So I was made a permanent member of staff, and I was there for some time until I did my first degree. I did my first degree in guidance and counseling, and I specifically did it in guidance and counseling because of the nature of the children that I taught, and it always included some home interventions, you know, some counseling with the parent, and some additional work other than just the teaching learning exchange. And I realized that I had a passion for helping outside of just the classroom. And so I did my first degree in guidance and counseling. Even as I explained to you my own experiences, I really was motivated by that, by helping young people to make sure that, you know, they would transition healthily in life. Anyway, so I did my first degree in guidance and counseling, but when I came back to the school and I told the principal that, listen, I want to practice guidance and counseling, so I'm going to move on to another school, and she was like, oh, I don't want to lose you. I'm going to apply to the ministry for a second counselor, and which she did. And so she
Yes.
retained me as a
Yes.
counselor. She gave me a little space as an office, and I was working with the children and so forth. But it didn't work out because I had, based on my learning, a comprehensive guidance program to implement, which had a
Yes.
lot of different aspects: the social, the spiritual, the
Yes.
educational, and all of these things. So, but she was not up for that, because she
Okay.
just thinks it is just something you just call a one child and talk to the child
Yes.
and all of that. But we want to do it comprehensively and get all the
Mm-hmm.
stakeholders involved. No, she's not into that. So because of that, now I moved on
Mm-hmm.
to another school that would allow me the opportunity to expand a comprehensive guidance program, and that was Golden
Golden
Spring
Spring.
Primary.
Mm-hmm.
And that principal, God bless her heart, Mrs. Joycelyn Bennett,
Mm-hmm.
she was a past counselor herself, so she understood where I was going, and she gave me the
Okay.
length and the breadth to just,
Yes.
launch out into the program. And the program was very, very successful at the school. And so in that course of time, I was also seen by the ministry as an effective counselor. I was trained as a master trainer, and then I transitioned from there onto the health and family life education team at the regional level.
Okay.
And so, yes, that's how I went on to the ministry. And then after that, as a community relations education officer.
Okay, okay. And while at Golden Spring, though, you wanted to implement like Pathfinders program and a scouting program and so forth. And it was through that means that you would have met Mr. Rose. So tell us about that.
Oh, my dear, I must tell you that I am the first educator in Jamaica who implemented the Pathfinder program in school. I know the
Okay.
ministry is doing that now on a broad-based level, along with other uniform groups. But I had the idea first, and I approached the East Jamaica Conference, and they agreed, and we had a big launch of the program, and everything. It was videotaped, and kudos were given, and it was an effective program in especially helping, well, all youngsters, but especially boys who
Mm-hmm.
were main target, because the boys needed an additional, support at the
Yes.
school. However, we never had the funding, we never had the resources to continue the program. So the scouting became a more feasible alternative. And so
Okay.
we tried scouting now,
Mm-hmm.
and I was introduced to Mr. Rose,
Yes.
who was the uh, assistant district commissioner for scouting in St. Andrew.
Okay.
Now, he was also a past student of Golden Spring Primary.
Okay.
So, when he came on and he was saying, I'm very happy for this initiative, because I would have initiated it some years
Mm-hmm.
ago, but it didn't work out because I never had that point person to,
Mm-hmm.
to drive it. And so I'm very happy. So
Yes.
little did I know that in addition to helping with the boys and working on the program, he had other intentions.
Yes.
So he would want to talk to me after a session with the boys and so forth, and he would just, find little things to have conversation about. And I was like, not, I wasn't suspecting anything. I was just
Yes.
responding, enjoying the conversation, talking with him, exchanging, and then I found myself looking forward to his
The
coming,
conversations.
his conversations, and follow up conversations, exchanging
Yes.
number, talking on the phone, and it just
Yes.
blossomed into this wonderful friendship
Mm-hmm.
and relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and then marriage.
Marriage.
That one just hit me by surprise, because I didn't see it coming any at
Yes.
all,
Yes.
and so, and because we had similar interests in terms of, the community services, volunteering,
Mm-hmm.
family life,
Mm-hmm.
our interests were, very common. And so it helped us to, support each other in our different aspects. And he too was recently, at that time when I met him, appointed in his church as a
Okay.
minister.
Okay.
And so he needed that kind of support, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in his church and so forth, and I provided that kind of, support for him as well. And so it was a done deal. And so we went into our marriage, which was, it wasn't very smooth sailing, but, the Lord helped us and we petered out, and we tried for a child at first, and about 2 years later, and I found that I was pregnant, and I was very excited, and
Yes.
it was not to be. We lost the first child, and it was a very sad experience. I remember the
Yes.
Lord giving me a promise and saying that it will happen again. Just,
Yes.
be faithful. And just by, when we did the checkups for that baby that we lost, when I did the checkup, I realized that there was an issue. The
Yes.
gynecologist told me that they saw a mass or something. No, I was rejecting it. I didn't want to hear that there was something there. But, acceptance, we got there and started to treat what was there, which was a fibroid, a very huge one too.
Wow.
And so in between treating that fibroid, I found that I was pregnant again very soon after. And so the doctor told me that we would have to carry the baby along with the fibroid. We couldn't remove it again. And then
Okay.
after the baby, we would remove the fibroid. But then we would have to realize that the fibroid would compete with the baby for the nutrients, because it's like
Yes.
this living thing,
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it said it was growing along with the baby. It was growing along with the baby and competing with the baby for nutrients. So this little boy had challenges from he was conceived,
Yes.
but
Yes.
he too is resilient. He's a fighter. And so he came, we had the baby, but he had to come through C-section because
Yes.
of the position of the fibroid too. And
Okay.
so I did my first surgery. Latoya, it was the first time I was going to be admitted in the hospital. I was so excited about the whole thing. Fearful, yes, about being cut and all of that, but I was just there journaling from the very first moment I went in on the ward and everything, and I was writing down all my experience because it was the first time. I wasn't, well, I'm not a sickly person, thank God.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
so it was the first experience in the hospital. And after that, about 2 years after, we got pregnant. Well, before that, I had to remove the fibroid. So I had another surgery, remove the fibroid, and then about 2 years later, here comes our daughter, and it was C-section again. So I was cut 3 times,
Times.
I think that is
Wow.
enough,
Wow.
right?
Yes.
So, but God helped me, and I overcame those surgeries. Um, so why I had we had our second child in the US. And so
Yes.
while we were in the US now, we got the opportunity because Javier, we found that he was getting sick very often, these
Yes.
respiratory problems. And then we had a concern too. He started out talking, saying the mama dada thing, and then after a while he just stopped talking altogether. And
Wow.
even if you wanted feeding or anything, he would just give us his cup or just touch us. And he would not say anything. And
Okay.
we were very concerned. Anyway, we did this examination of him, a comprehensive examination, and then the results came back. And Latoya, it was revealed to us that he had a high blood lead level. So,
Wow.
that hit us for six because we cannot fathom and couldn't understand where that exposure would have come from. But by the grace of God, the beautiful thing is that we caught it and we realized what was the problem and what was causing the developmental delay. And so that has driven the passion for me to continue with studies in the area.
Okay. Wow. That was a very interesting part one of your story, Louise. I want to thank you for sharing with us for part 1, and for part 2, you will pick up by telling us how you understood what was happening with your son and the studies that you would have done or you want to do about toxic lead. So thank you again for joining me on Defying the Odds for part 1 of the story of Louise Lawrence Rose. Until then, on Defying the Odds.